Today's big idea, innovation. And we're going to kick off the conference with one of the most important and inspiring innovators of our era. In fact, it's thanks to this first Meridian speaker that, despite the pandemic, we're all able to connect today on this virtual platform. In 1989, he invented the World Wide Web, weaving together three fundamental technologies that remain the foundation of today's virtual world: HTML, URL, and HTTP. Since then, he's been busy advocating for a free, open, accessible web. He founded the World Wide Web Consortium, a global standards organization that helps the web realize its potential. He founded the World Wide Web Foundation, which seeks to ensure the web serves humanity by establishing it as a global public good and a basic right. And he co-founded the Open Data Institute, which seeks to show the value of open data and advocate for the innovative use of open data to effect positive change across the globe. It is my great pleasure and honor to introduce this incredible pioneer, Sir Tim Berners-Lee. Welcome to Meridian.
Thank you. Thank you, Justin. And it's great to be here. An honor to kick it off. These are straight, it's a strange time. We're learning to do things in a different way. It's strange that we have to meet because we can't travel. But I have to say that one of the things that we have noticed is that for a lot of people, the fact that they have had to be connected by the internet and they've done all their work on the web has meant that they've realized that actually it becomes a lifeline rather than just no longer the fun toy or the nice to have. So these are different. These are strange times. Would I have ever imagined that we'd have had the pandemic? Would I have ever imagined 30 years ago when I invented the web that we would be in this situation with the web either? I'll take you back a bit. I invented the web in 1989 at CERN in Geneva. The internet, remember, the web and the internet are different. The internet had been invented 20 years before. The internet itself was already an open, permissionless space. It was a platform that didn't have an attitude as to what you should do with it. So that's how I was able to build the web on top of the internet. At CERN, there were people coming from all over the world to share their research and build things together. But each of them came with their own computer systems as well. Despite the fact there was a lot of collaboration in person, their computer systems were not helping this. So I was frustrated by this lack of interoperability between all these different types of computer, and in particular the types of documentation system that were running on these computers. I imagined fixing it by building a sort of meta documentation system, if you like, which would virtually contain all the others. It had to do that, it had to be powerful enough to map all of their existing user interfaces into one meta human interface language, if you like. So hypertext was that. Hypertext was the general unconstrained world of links, which Ted Nelson had invented the word for, at least. And so hypertext was the user interface model. The internet was there to connect the back ends. I proposed this idea. I wrote a memo to my boss, Mike Sandel. And in fact, fortunately, and very lucky for the web, he allowed me to do it as an unofficial project in between two official projects. So that's, when it comes to innovation, sometimes somebody allowing you the time to do that, whether it's the 20% time or in my case, the 120% time, then that can be really crucial. So what I wanted to build was a system for collaboration, for creativity, learning and connecting. I felt it had to be a read-write system, so anybody could contribute to it. I wanted it to be constantly updated. I realized if it was going to be up to date compared to a lot of systems up there, it had to be instantly easy to be updated by anybody. So if you saw something was wrong, you could fix it. So I knew it had to be open. It had to be a universal system to include all those other systems. It had to be independent of language, of type of document, of structure of document, of culture and ability or disability of the user. Very important to me was the idea of connecting people anywhere in the world and the sharing of ideas. I had a thought that on one side of the world, there could be somebody with 50% of the solution to a problem. On the other side of the world would be somebody with the other 50%. And I wanted the web to be a place where those two people could connect and build the complete solution together in the hypertext. Fortunately, my team were already connected by the internet, right? 20 years on, we had email, we had network news, if anybody remembers that. We had file transfer protocol sites. So those internet tools, much cruder than the web, but in a way, a useful way to bootstrap ourselves into being an online team. When it was released, the web grew exponentially. And in fact, after a decade or so, it looked like it was promising mostly good things. The blogosphere looked positive, lots of Wikipedia, and so on. So I think a lot of people felt that it was going to be net good. But the web, as I'd hoped originally, isn't the web that we're seeing today. There are a lot of issues, and there are issues of centralization into social networking silos. There are issues of misinformation. There are issues of data ownership. There's issues of manipulation through fake news and conspiracy theories. So there are lots, they're now getting quite well documented. But it's always concerned me that the web should serve humanity well. So yes, as you mentioned, I started the Web Consortium in 1994 to coordinate the standards, the Web Foundation to advance the web generally as a public good and as a right, and the Open Data Institute to look at open data and advocate more for it. But what I want to talk to you right now is my work with Solid. So Solid is a new way to connect people and data. It's if you like, some people call it the web take 3. It's protocol, it's open source code. It's open source web-based protocol that re-architects the way data is stored and shared. And as a result, how apps are developed. Solid uses existing web standards like HTTP, WebSockets, and linked data. A Solid spec is, if you like, a universal API between servers, between apps and stores. So this allows any shape of data to be written into a store. And then the store is controlled by the user. Any app they allow access to their store can then read or write as appropriate data from the store. We call these stores personal online data stores because that's like pods. So your Solid pod. Think of a Solid pod like it's a place for storing data. It's a bit like a USB key in the sky, if you like. A user can store all their data on their pod or several pods. You may have pods for work, pods with that you use for different things, but they're all compatible. And to the apps, they all look the same. They all talk the Solid spec. The pods are responsible for access control. So the pod implements your wishes about who gets access to what. You can share any of the data in your pod with anyone you choose or with no one at all. So the way Solid works clearly is total opposite to the way apps work, the way they're built today, where you hand your data over to some company where you want some service, you go to some web app and it stores your data in the silo and it's locked inside that app forever. Currently, the utility you get from your own data is limited, but the organization, the data, the sort of value that social networking silo gets from your data is much greater. What's wrong with this picture? that's not fair, it's not useful. Solid flips this current dysfunctional world of data silos upside down, puts the user on the top. In fact, you could say it flips the web right side up. It puts users back in control in a way that, in a way, it used to be when everybody felt they could have their own website and their own blog. The same sense of sovereign identity, of a contributor amongst peers, sense of agency as an individual. The solid world is incredibly empowering, not just for everyday people who want more agency over their personal data, but also for developers and also for organizations which store other people's personal data. Once everyone has a solid pod, life for developers is great. We can tap into a rich tapestry of permissioned data to fuel our creativity and solve problems. Solid allows developers to focus on the functionality of the app without having to create a specific backend for each app. All right, the solid pod of all the people out there who are going to use your app, that provides a generic backend store which works with your apps without modification. No changes to the backend, you write your app. And the solid culture also includes beneficent apps which do right by users. Beneficent apps work for the user. And they're much more fun to write. In the solid ecosystem, there are lots of different business models that are emerging. And for example, different ways in which you can fund solid pods, and different ways in which you can fund people writing apps, different ways in which people will pay for services and so on. So the world is turning into a much richer one, in which we don't assume that the only way you can make money in a startup is from clickbait. Massive improve. In order to fuel the uptake of Solid, I co-founded Inrupt, the company. Inrupt has been providing resources to make Solid a reality. I'm hugely excited to be working with Inrupt because we can provide a commercial force as additional accountability for Solid systems for those who want the commercial version. Whereas, of course, there's a huge and complete Solid open source stack. Last week, Inrupt released an enterprise Solid server on general availability, and we're working with some large companies looking at deploying Solid initially at scale, including the National Health Service in the UK, the BBC, the Flanders government, looking at everybody at giving everybody in Flanders, that part of Belgium, a pod, and also talked to NatWest Bank, for example. So a very exciting place with Solid. Very happy to talk to you more about it. Both Solid and Stellar are systems where open source software is critical. As with the web 30 years ago, even though open source wasn't the term then, there are these three things: the original web, Solid, and Stellar, all platforms. All platforms did you want anybody to be able to play with by firing up an open source implementation and having at it. At Stellar, your work with open source software for financial services has been really important. The open source world has changed enormously, certainly over the last 30 years. Instead of coding out functions from scratch, nowadays we just search for an existing solution. We suck in huge amounts of supporting code as we satisfy the dependencies of the things we've decided to use. Now, of course, there are lots of issues with this. The basic rule that a function is only written once, and otherwise you just search for it, is very powerful. It's a different open source world, if you like. I hope also that in the future, solid apps will start also to take on the functions of those centralized open source repositories. In fact, that opening that up, the open source development tool set, if you like, will produce a new wave of innovation in those tools themselves. The motivation of these systems, of course, is not building systems for the sake of systems. When I think about the future, I want us to build apps that promote science and democracy and trust and inclusion. Software and organizations that promote inclusion, like Stellar for inclusive financial systems and Solid for inclusive social and collaborative systems, I think are hugely important. I want to see software that works for the user. I want to see beneficent apps. I feel that the open source world is full of people already building beneficent apps, because that's the way open source works. Even though people raise their eyebrows about where's the revenue going to come from when you talk about beneficent apps. But the whole world of open source and the things we're building like Stellar and Solid makes me altogether really, really excited about the future. Happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Fantastic, thanks for that. We are definitely getting a lot of questions coming in, and I just want to tell everyone at Meridian, you can submit questions for Sir Tim via the QA bar on the right-hand side of your screen. We'll take as many as possible before the end of the session. And I want to start out, there's actually a bunch of questions that have already come in, and a lot of them have a similar theme. So I'm kind of going to bundle them together, and it's, what similarities do you see between the early phases of the World Wide Web and the state of blockchain now? And a related question, basically, blockchain is a great technology, but it's underutilized. What do you think needs to happen to spark the network effect that made the World Wide Web what it is today? Those are from Wouter and Dan and Stefan.
That's interesting because blockchain and Solid they're both sort of decentralization, but in a way they're quite different systems. So the way they take off is different. Blockchain is a software where everybody runs the software, and you have servers all over the place, and it's decentralized in that everybody stores exactly the same copy of the blockchain. With Solid, it's completely different. Everybody runs can run their own Solid pod, but they will put completely different things on it. And with a Solid pod, you can put a huge amount of effort into your Solid pod or not. You can pay somebody huge amounts of money to make a very secure and robust Solid pod or not, and so on. Whereas with blockchain, in a way, the quality of services is the same because everybody's relying on the same network of people to support it. So in a way, they're very different. So it's hard to pick up. It's hard to try to reasons for picking up blockchain systems and reasons for picking up web-based systems may not convert from one to the other. It's always good to connect systems together. So one of the things we've always said that the Solid needs we have a good single sign-in system for the whole web. At the moment, that is OIDC based, and so we've got to do a hook waiting there. So one of the things we could do is we can connect them. We could use blockchain based login for Solid would be great. If I can log into my Solid web ID with blockchain, then they will take off together.
A related question, this one's from David. Has Solid or Inrupt considered leveraging Stellar as a platform for decentralized monetization for a payment layer?
We've been, just recently, has been a lot of interest in, I say an increasing interest in payment in general. And so I think that, for example, somebody played with a Solid-based payment system, which involved people just putting digitally signed things on your solid pod. You can do that to a certain extent. You can, you can sign it, digitally sign an IOU and put it in your solid pod, and so on. So you can and so you can build sorts of I think another connection is that as the solid world is interested in being a great variety of payment systems, and just as people, I think there's a backlash coming that people they don't want fake news, they want to pay. Micropayment like Satoshi Pay, for example, is I think is really interesting. We've never, micropayment has been promised for years. Every like 5 years, we say, let's do micropayments. It doesn't happen. But now, you can pay for both content, people now realize after the fake news debacle that they want to be able to pay a journalist to work for them, and why not pay a musician to make music, and why not pay an app developer to be able to develop a beneficent app for you. So adding micropayment, you're making the payment services in general smoother and easier, obviously makes all that better.
Great. This one's from Lee. What is the big blocker for adoption of Solid?
Well, I'm not sure that there is one particular big blocker that, in a way. So I say there's we've got two models of the way it takes off. One is that one of these, we're talking to all these large companies. So we talk to a bank gives everybody a solid pods. People start using it for doing their taxes. After a while, people realize that, the tax software, people realize that it's really good tax. There's some, it starts itself, the products start being deployed like by the Flanders government widely, so they're usually available. And then just within Flanders, you get Solid then taking off. First, just doing stuff with the Flanders government, then bit by bit, people start using all kinds of apps, and then Flanders starts humming, and then people just go out and get Solid pods because they need it. And, and then it takes off like that. So it could take off virally, but within a particular space. Another possibility is that it's hanging around in various places, but one particular community, maybe journalists develop apps for tracking their stats, keep having interviews very, very securely and keeping their sources secret. Maybe people start sharing fitness data or something like that. Something that's one particular thing, and it takes off in a vertical. And so then it runs, and so it then spreads virally, but just through people interested in one particular thing. And then all the other apps start connecting on. So it's when you try to predict which app is going to be the app which people take a fancy to, well, it's a bit like, I think you can't do that, because when you look at the silly dances on YouTube, the silly, like the people that go viral, you can't predict those. So you can't predict what the general public out there are going to take a fancy to. But you do have to be ready so that when they do, the systems will scale.
Fantastic. This one's from Frank, and I think it's generally about advice, right? So knowing what you know now, what advice would you give your younger self regarding development of the initial World Wide Web protocols? And I think we can even extrapolate that to say, as an ecosystem of people that are working to develop the Stellar protocol, what advice would you give us?
Well, for me, the web was a completely decentralized system where everybody generates the own name for their document, apart from the fact that I said that the name would start off with a domain name. What's wrong with this picture? So in fact, the domain name system is in fact a centralized system, and it has a root. And as a result of me picking the domain name system, if you want a solid pod, you have to get a domain name, you have to get a domain name, you have to go through a centralized system, where you may end up, somebody may have already bought the domain name you wanted, and just out of spite, or just out of, and they maybe may want to charge you an arm and a leg for it. So the domain name system has been a disappointment. I hope that it will be run as a public benefit, as a public institution. It hasn't. It's just been read as a bunch of very much as a trade organization of all the people who make lots of money out of domain names. So okay, so I suppose if it's what the rule is, look out for any form of centralization, and even also so with a blockchain, if there's only one blockchain, is that in fact a form of centralization? Well, if not the Bitcoin blockchain, isn't the one you're using, but they thought it would be. So, but it became in a way centralized. That was the main blockchain, and people found actually they didn't want to use the blockchain. So I don't know. Beware of DNS certainly. Let's rebuild bits of DNS. Let's make it a top-level domain which doesn't use DNS, as it were.
Interesting. I mean, I feel like there's a trade-off between centralization is often easier on consumers, but ultimately worse for society as a whole. And how do you sort of deal with that fact? How do you make it so that a decentralized system is actually consumer friendly?
There's lots of ways, in fact, in which you need centralization. So, for example, yeah, when you use the Solid, it's really useful to have a list of all the Solid apps and a list of all the Solid pod servers, and a list of all the open source software. And it's useful to have central GitHub repositories of all the code and stuff. But really, but in a way, they are a crutch, which we're using until we're fly in and do everything. In a way, hopefully we will, when we do our project management, we will be using decentralized project management tools on top of Solid in future. So what was the question again?
I guess my question was, how do you do that in a way that makes it user friendly so that in order to spur adoption, so that from a user point of view, it's just as easy to use, say, a Solid app as it is to use a Web 2.0 app?
Well, I suppose one of the challenges we find is we're trying to do everything in the browser. And so you have to put everything through the browser, and the browser is your interface. So for example, key management. So if you want to do something secure, if your name is if you're going to join the system, whatever, blockchain or Solid, and what you do is your computer, your phone mints a key pair. You create a cryptographic sovereign identity, and you keep the private key with you on your phone, and then the public key you publish. And then when you do that, managing that private key, backing it up, sharing it between all, so doing that easily is a challenge. But if you do that, if you could do that so that somebody can call themselves whatever they like, but the system actually knows them by a 4-kilobit key, then that is the art. Certainly, doing cryptographically strong things, but in a way that very simple, but that doesn't involve user steps which are different from sending an Instagram photo. That is the art, I think. Yeah,
that's interesting. I mean, key management is something that we at SDF and that the Stellar ecosystem as a whole has been thinking about a lot. And it's definitely something that we're going to be bringing up a lot over the course of the next few days. I think that's all the time that we have right now for questions, but thanks everybody for submitting them. Again, you can do that throughout Meridian. You could submit questions via the QA bar, and we will definitely try to get to all of them. There were tons for Sir Tim. I really appreciate everyone's engagement, and Sir Tim, I really appreciate the time you took to talk with us today. It's definitely an honor to have you. Thank you so much.
The honor is mine. Thanks for letting me join you, the Stellar crowd.
Yeah, of course. And I'm sure everyone is going to leave this talk and go just, if they haven't already, dig into Solid. It's pretty amazing that it is so developer focused.
Yeah, solidproject.org.
Solidproject.org. Perfect.
Not.com. Yeah.
Not.com. Yeah. Same as Stellar, stellar.org.
Right.